All right, we turn now to Trump's so-called big, beautiful bill, which is currently sitting in the Senate. Think about every way to sabotage an economy, and it's probably in this bill, which might explain why even members of Trump's own party can't get behind it. This massive bill, Trump's flagship second-term agenda, barely passed the House by a single vote, and it's now possibly stalled in the Senate, not because Democrats are blocking it, they can't block it, but because the math just isn't mathing. And for some Republican senators, asking their constituents to foot the bill for tax cuts for the wealthy is a bit of a tough sell. On the surface, the big, beautiful bill is wrapped in some pretty good working-class promises. No taxes on tips and child tax credits. But behind those crumbs, literally, are permanent tax breaks for the very wealthy and deep cuts to Medicaid, SNAP, and clean energy programs, including the electric vehicle rebates that has Elon Musk so hot under the collar. Meanwhile, analysis from the left-leaning Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy says households making more than $900,000 a year would pocket almost a quarter of the net tax cuts in the bill, and nearly 11 million people could lose their health coverage, according to the Congressional Budget Office. That's the real story here. Also tucked in the fine print, a repeal of the federal excise tax on gun silencers, and wait for it, indoor tanning services. Tax breaks for big, beautiful tanning. Interesting. But back to the numbers, which only get worse. The CBO, the nonpartisan agency that Congress created to cut through political spin, says Trump's bill would add, not subtract, add $2.4 trillion to the deficit. $2.4 trillion. That's over 10 years. Independent experts say it could be higher, up to $3.1 trillion. Tell me again how this is a growth plan. It's not. It's trickle-up economics. What this is class warfare in disguise. Even Trump's ex-BFF, Elon Musk, is torching the plan. He posted more than 24 times on X in a 48-hour period, calling it a disgusting abomination that will doom the country to debt slavery. Now, when the Thelma to Trump's Louise decides, actually, I'm not dying in this car with you, you know you've got a problem. Okay, I keep getting distracted. Let's go back to the numbers. $2.4 trillion added to the deficit. 11 million Americans losing health care coverage. Some estimates are higher. A tax code permanently skewed to serve the rich. ICE funding increases. 365% more for detention, 500% more for deportation. It's worth noting, private prison companies lining up for those ICE contracts donated more than $1 million to Trump's reelection. But instead of facing the math, Trump and his House Speaker Mike Johnson are attacking the Congressional Budget Office, calling it Democrat-controlled, even as Republican economists rush to the defense of the CBO. Douglas Holtz-Eakin, a former CBO director himself, said the CBO has nonpartisanship in its DNA. Jessica Riedel, a senior fellow at the right-leaning Manhattan Institute, also tells NPR that the CBO was designed to provide lawmakers with objective information about the budgetary impact of proposed legislation. Quote, it is important as a separation of powers for Congress to have their own scorekeeping agency so that they're not dependent on the White House to tell them what the budget looks like and how much legislation will cost, end quote. These are their own Republican experts, but rather than listen to their experts, Republicans in Congress are instead doing what they do best, rewriting the rules, MAGA style, to make the numbers look better than they actually are. Enter their favorite budget gimmick these days, so-called dynamic scoring, which means projecting all the economic growth they hope this bill will magically create, and then baking those possible but highly optimistic numbers into the budget math. It's basically a fantasy formula that assumes that tax cuts will pay for themselves. Spoiler alert. Yeah, you said it. They don't. In fact, a report from Penn's Wharton School found the opposite. Dynamic scoring actually showed a bigger increase in the deficit, partly because the bill would encourage higher income workers to work fewer hours, resulting in lower income tax revenue. Believing that this plan is going to pay for itself or they're going to grow their way out of the deficit is the equivalent of quitting your job because you're sure you're going to win the lottery or at least get a really big raise. Except this Republican gamble is not theoretical. It's actually messing with the livelihoods of millions of Americans. And there's another gaping hole in the Republican analysis, by the way, Trump's tariffs. Much of the bill's revenue depends on them, but tariffs are only in effect while he's in office, which is until January 20th, 2029, unless you believe Steve Bannon, who says Trump's good for another term in office. Come 2029, a new president could reverse them with the stroke of a pen. Secondly, so you can't rely on that revenue, but secondly, tariffs are designed to reduce imports. So if that goal is achieved, then we won't get all that tariff revenue. And finally, several court challenges which are underway could kill the tariffs outright. So this bill depends on a lot of things that might not happen, even if they survive. There's another problem, Trump himself. He's threatening Apple. He's picking fights with the EU. He's disrupting supply chains. He's provoking retaliation from other countries. Not to mention that companies evade tariffs all the time through loopholes, through smuggling, through rerouted supply chains. Bottom line, these tariffs are not a stable, predictable source of revenue. They are, like Trump himself, a wild card. Now, reasonable people can debate tax and fiscal policy. But this part's not a debate. It's smoke and mirrors funded by 1 part monopoly money and 2 parts America's social safety net. No wonder even some Republicans are panicking, because the one thing this bill definitely isn't is fiscally responsible, something that once upon a time was Republican orthodoxy. Finance Chair Mike Crapo warns at least 2 GOP senators are already hard-nosed. One more defection, and this bill is dead. Others, like Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, and Josh Hawley, are nervous too, because they know what deep cuts to Medicaid and SNAP actually mean back home. Their constituents losing health care, kids going hungry, states left scrambling to fill the gaps. This isn't just bad policy. It's cruel. It would usher in a Gilded Age 2.0, where deficits are no problem if they're there to fund tax cuts for billionaires and apparently tanning aficionados. But they're totally acceptable if they support health care, food assistance, or clean energy. And when you have even Republicans racing to defuse this political time bomb before it blows up in the faces of working and middle-class Americans, that is a flashing red warning sign. So as the July 4th deadline for Trump's big, beautiful bill approaches, keep your eyes on the real fight. This was never about shrinking the government. It was about how many ways Trump can squeeze working Americans to bankroll his tax cuts for the ultra-rich.